Where am I going? Right here. Hi everybody, this is Betty Morse. I'm a family support consultant with the Vermont Family Network, and I'm happy to be joining you on this sunny morning. The Vermont Family Network and this webinar we are happy to bring this to you, and we're located at 600 Blair Park in Williston. So welcome to Prepare Yourself and Preparing for Emergencies for people with disabilities and chronic health conditions. Please bear with us as we go through some technical difficulties here. So our agenda today is we're going to start out with some facts about emergency preparedness. What is emergency preparedness? What kind of emergencies does your community or state have? We're going to talk about planning, how to be more informed, identify your resources and create an emergency plan, and being ready with such things as go bags and ready kits. And then there'll be some resources at the end. We're going to start off with our ARC statistics, and I got this from Chad Spooner. He's the public health specialist, emergency preparedness Vermont, from the Vermont Department of Health in St. Albans, and he got this information from the ARC. So globally, there are 650 million people with disabilities. And nationally, there is 56.4 million Americans. That's 20% of the population. So 11 million Americans over the age of 6 need personal assistance with their daily activities. And a little bit about the ARC is the ARCs promotes and protects the human rights of people with intellectual and developmental disability and actively supports their full inclusion and participation in the community throughout their lifetime. So nationally, among individuals with disabilities 15 years or older, you can see some of this data that's here, that 1.8 million are unable to see printed words, 1 million are unable to hear conversations, 2.5 million have difficulty with they're having their speech understood. 16.1 million have a cognitive, intellectual, or mental health disability. 3.3 million people over the age of 14 use a wheelchair. And you have to add on another 10 million who have at one time or another used canes or crutches or a walker to get around for 6 months or longer. And in just looking at some of Vermont's statistics, the population between 5 and 20 years old with a disability is 8.3% of the population. And over 21 to 64 years old, that is 16.2% of our population have a disability. And 65 years older with a disability is 38.6% of our population. Vermont's total population is 608,827 people. And so if you look at that, that means that 16% of Vermont population has some kind of a special need, which would lead to increased planning. So it does pay to plan ahead. It wasn't raining when Noah built the ark, but he was prepared. So the meaning and the concept of planning, in simple words, planning is deciding in advance what is to be done, when, where, and how, and by whom it is to be done. Planning bridges the gaps from where we are to where we want to go. It looks at the different options, and it includes the selection and procedures from among those many alternatives that we're looking at. And then we have our plan, which is predetermined course of action to achieve that goal. And it really is an intellectual process characterized by thinking before doing. So let's start looking at what is emergency preparedness. There's the official blurb. Emergency preparedness is the preparation and planning necessary to effectively handle an emergency. It involves individuals developing an emergency plan that identifies services they require and what resources they need to have on hand in case of an emergency. And when it comes to emergency planning, you know yourself and your needs the best. So you are the ideal person to create your personalized emergency preparedness plan. And people who cannot independently create one by themselves, well, they're going to need assistance from caregivers and others from their support systems to help them. When creating your personal preparedness plan, it's always important to identify the following: who the responsible party is for carrying out the specific actions, what personal equipment, what supplies, what medications are specific and needed by an individual. You're going to have emergency contact information. And other resources, you're going to want to know what other resources are available for your use in times of an emergency. And if you rely on other people, you're going to have some kind of an outline or a plan of how these actions will be coordinated to best meet your needs. And depending on your disability, your specific emergency plan may need to include resources on the type of assistance needed and instructions on how to obtain vital resources, especially during an emergency, and the coordination of the transportation and the payment and delivery of supplies when sometimes the normal ways of getting these things to people during an emergency aren't available. And just always remember that the emergency plan should be written and given to loved ones, caregivers, and other people that are with you. So are you prepared? Emergency preparedness during hurricanes, acts of terrorism, pandemic, flu, and floods, those are all things that come to our minds today when we're thinking about emergency preparedness. But even though we all know what can happen, are we prepared? Would we know what to do? For individuals with disabilities and families of children with special needs, planning becomes even more difficult. Knowing how you will respond is critical. It means extra attention to details and needs that a typical family may not have to worry about. I was once at a meeting, and they asked, there was two of us parents there, and they asked us for emergency preparedness, what would we do? And I kind of laughed at them and looked at them and said, oh, are you kidding? I'm a parent of a child with special needs. I'm in a constant state of emergency preparedness. But of course, there is much more than that. That was a flip answer on my part. So if we start thinking ahead and looking to the future, we want to start looking into what kind of natural disasters and emergency situations there are out there. And these disasters and emergency situations are not new to Vermont. Each natural disaster has the potential to displace, injure, and take life. It can cause property damage to thousands. And we need to think about potential situations and make sure that we can adapt our own plans to meet ourselves or our family's need, no matter what the cause of the emergency. So your family should sit down and discuss emergencies and what types are known to be in your area and the types that might come to your area. Fires, flooding, blizzards, and ice storms. And there was a really big ice storm back in 1998. Those things may come to your mind to discuss. On July 18th, there was a severe thunderstorm with estimated winds in the excess of 100 miles per hour, and that touched down in North Cambridge, Vermont, and uprooted and snapped numerous trees and caused extensive damage to a small farm along Highway 108. Eyewitness accounts indicated that the high winds lasted about 5 minutes and were characterized by strong southerly winds followed by an abrupt shift of damaging winds to the northwest. And the wind shift was actually documented by some alert individual on her cell phone. Then again on July 28th, the National Weather Service did officially declare that it was a tornado that touched down twice between 3:27 and 3:35 on July 18th as it crossed North Cambridge Road and Highway 108. And then there was the spring of 2011 when Lake Champlain reached 103 feet, and flood level for Lake Champlain is at 100 feet, so we were 3 feet above the flood level. And on the top right is Sandbar State Park in Milton, which was completely underwater. And the bottom left is Isle La Motte, which not only was cut in half by flooding, but the causeway into the island became flooded and needed to close for days. And then, of course, Hurricane Irene in 2011, up to 15 inches of rain from the weekend storm turned placid streams into churning brown torrents that knocked homes off their foundations, and it flattened trees and took big giant bites out of the asphalt across the countryside. And at least 3 people died in Vermont. So as we begin to look at our emergency preparedness plan, before an emergency happens, you need to sit down together and decide how you will get in contact with each other, because maybe you're not all in the same place when something happens. You want to know where you will go and what you will do in an emergency, how you will get in contact with one another, and you're going to want to keep a copy of this plan in your emergency supply kit or another safe place where you can access it in the event of a disaster. You will need to discuss with children and individuals with developmental disabilities why you need to prepare for emergencies, explain the dangers of fire, severe weather, and hurricanes to them, and plan to share responsibilities and work together as a team. Role-playing and doing a drill for different types of emergencies will keep everyone focused when an emergency actually does hit, and then they will know what they should be doing from the practice runs. This link site located on the bottom of your screen is where there is a PDF family emergency plan that you can download and fill out with contact numbers, and then each member in your family can have one. When creating your personal preparedness plan, it is important to identify the following. You need to have a responsible person for carrying out specific actions. You need to think about personal equipment, supplies, medication that are very specific to an individual. You're going to want to have that emergency contact information, and you're also going to have to think about other resources available for use during the emergency. And depending on your disability, your specific emergency plan could include resources such as an outline of how all actions will be coordinated, because all plans are really good, but if it's not coordinated and followed, then it's really not a plan. You're going to have to talk about the type of assistance needed and instructions on how to obtain the vital resources, and coordination of the transportation, payment, and delivery of the supplies. Emergency plans should be written and given to loved ones, caregivers, and other relevant parties. Benjamin Disraeli, the first Earl of Beaconsfield, he was a prime minister for England, said, "I am prepared for the worst, but I hope for the best." We must all do our part to plan for disasters. Be sure to discuss the types of natural disasters and emergency situations that could happen. As a family, discuss how this can affect all family members and how you will all address the special needs of persons with a disability, and explain what to do in each case. Pick 2 places to meet in the event that you are separated. You might pick, this is a little plan about for a family that, in case there's a fire, how to get out of their house and where to meet. You might pick outside your home, such as in this, and in case of a sudden emergency, such as a fire. Or if you can't return home, you could pick someplace outside of your neighborhood. Everyone must know the address of the meeting place and how to contact one another. It's a good idea when you're planning to ask an out-of-state friend to be your family contact. And it has shown that after a disaster, it's often easier to call long distance than local. Other family members should call this person and let them know where they are. This will be the hub, this out-of-state person, and everyone should memorize their contact's phone number. And nowadays, a lot of people are keeping contact by finding access to email or Facebook pages and face-to-face things on the computer like that. Another part of planning is post those emergency telephone numbers by the phone. Teach your children how and when to call 911 or your local emergency medical services number. Show each adult member how and when to turn off the water, gas, and electricity at the main switches. And don't forget your pets. Plan how to take care of your pets or service animals. And talk about the best evacuation routes from your home. When you look at your list, you want to think about what your environment and community could look like after an emergency occurs. What resources or utilities may not be available? And if you are a person with a disability or chronic health condition, what might hamper your independence? You can get information from your local emergency management office. Find out who your local community response team is, and find out how you will be notified of an emergency. And see our team's service areas follow the boundaries of local emergency planning committees. And as part of the President's Homeland Security Plan, community response teams programs have been and continue to be formed in cities, towns, and counties, and other localities across America. The CERT operates under the Citizen Corps Council Plan that brings together community first responders, firefighters, law enforcement, EMS, emergency managers, and the volunteer community to involve all citizens in emergency preparedness, mitigation and response, crime prevention, and emergency medical training. Many catastrophic events severely restrict and often overwhelm communications, transportation, utilities, and emergency response capabilities. In addition, they leave many individuals and neighborhoods cut off from essential and emergency services. And we can't say that that doesn't happen in Vermont, because that did happen in southern Vermont right after Hurricane Irene. CERT members often offer support to emergency services by performing smaller tasks like traffic control in order to allow all emergency responders to carry out their critical functions. In circumstances where the public must be notified of an emergency, Vermont Emergency Management maintains a statewide emergency alert system. Vermont Emergency Management utilizes the EAS structure to relay local emergency messages via broadcast stations, cable, and wireless cable systems. And we've all heard that on our radios and our TV when they do their trial. Think of how this would work for people that have hearing loss or may not be able to understand the importance of that alert. A support system and plan are important for the people who rely on others. Consider how a disaster might affect our daily routines and supports. You can figure this out by making a list of your needs before a disaster, during the disaster, and after the disaster. You may want to do this as a family, or with your support network, or with your support person. You're going to need to identify your resources. You need to build your support network. You want to keep lists. You want to be thinking of these things. Some of the people that could be on your support network could be your family, your friends, your coworkers. Include people both in and out of your immediate neighborhood or community, like a relative in another state. Talk to these individuals and ask them to be part of your support network. You want to look at your personal attendants, your service providers, your neighbors. Think about who you rely on regularly and determine how a disaster might affect your use of them. Other things to include in your thinking is, do you have a service animal? What mobility aids do you use? What equipment are you relying on? How do you communicate? What part of your service relies on accessible transportation? And do you receive medical treatments daily? And we could think about people on dialysis and how important that is for them to be able to get to the hospital. And we also want to think about what medicines you might take. So ask your support network to make a plan with you. You should all make a plan for one for home, one for work, one if you're going to school, or any time that you spend time regularly. Your emergency plan should include hazards that you may encounter in your daily routines at home and in the community, and include in those plans that you already have in place that you use daily to deal with power outages or transportation delays or breakdowns. This will help you as you consider larger disasters such as blizzards, hurricanes, earthquakes, floods. Mother Teresa said, never worry about numbers. Help one person at a time and always start with the person nearest you. Evacuation. Just going over that again, have a plan for evacuating your home, at work, or school. And drills, they do that, fire drills all the time at a lot of workplaces and schools. It's a good thing to do at home. So that way when something happens, you're doing it automatically. And here are some tips. Tips. Check out evacuation assistive devices such as emergency exits, the ramps, evacuation plans when you're at a hotel, motel, usually on the back of the door. They have the evacuation plans there. Identify if there's an area of rescue assistance, and you'd want to contact the building safety director for help with that. Identify public and private resources for accessible transportation, and use your emergency, excuse me, use your emergency binder to aid others to understand you and your needs. For your personal or family situation, if you require assistance to evacuate, include that in your emergency plan with the assistance of your support network. If you are deaf or hard of hearing, who is going to be the designated person to come to you and let you know of the emergency and where the safe places are? And the same if you have mobility issues. If you have a hard time speaking or understanding what is going on, you could use your emergency binder to aid others in understanding your needs. If you receive regular services, such as home health care, transportation, dialysis, as we talked about before, make a plan with each of those service providers. Ask them to identify backup service providers that can help out, and learn about what their disaster plans and how to connect with them in an emergency. Finding shelter. One of the things you have to think about is if you're home, can you safely stay there? If you can't, can you go and stay with families or friends? Would a designated public shelter meet your needs? Do you have that ready kit and go bag ready? I've learned that you shouldn't go through life with a catcher's mitt on both hands. You need to be able to throw something back, and that was by Maya Angelou. So let's talk about being ready. We're going to talk about creating that comprehensive ready kit. Preparation is the key to surviving in an emergency and managing the chaos that occurs afterwards. There are many tips for preparing for a disaster that are applicable to all families. And in addition, individuals with disabilities and families with special needs must be prepared to manage their needs under very undesirable conditions. One way to prepare is to make an emergency supplies kit. By gathering and storing supplies in advance, your family can more readily handle an evacuation or home confinement. Remember that putting together an emergency kit can seem like a daunting task. So purchase and gather necessary items over a period of weeks or months and each year. Every 3 months, recycle water, food, and other perishable items from your kit. And it's really up to you to decide the most essential items to include for you and your family. Well, one of the things we need most is water, and it should be water in plastic containers. They want you to avoid containers such as cardboard milk cartons or glass bottles. And a person needs to drink at least 2 quarts of water each day. In hot environments, and if you're working really hard in an activity, that can actually double the amount of water needed. And children and nursing mothers and some persons with special needs will need more. So you need to store 1 gallon of water per person per day, and then keep at least a 3-day supply of water per person. And some of that 3-day supply of water per person can be broken down into 2 quarts for drinking and 2 quarts for each person in your household for food preparation and sanitation. You're going to want to have some food stored, and you want to select foods that require no refrigeration, preparation or cooking, and little or no water. If you must heat food, pack a can of sterno, and select food items that are compact and lightweight. And there's a list there. The staples. Some people like to make sure that they have their salt, their sugar, their pepper. High energy foods such as raisins, nuts, peanut butter, or granola bars. And of course the people who have maybe special diets, they want to make sure that those things are there. Disability and chronic illness supplies. You're going to need to have a 2-week supply of all disposable medical supplies, a 2-week supply of all medications, prescription and non-prescription. If you rely on medical equipment, you might need a generator or a battery backup. You're going to want to make sure you have copies of prescriptions for medical equipment and supplies and medications. If you have contact lenses, you might need an extra supply of those. Hearing aid batteries, if you use hearing aids, make sure you have your communication device and your special dietary foods, and manual wheelchairs, because if the electricity is down for extended period of time, that's important. And then we talk about kind of like the basic supplies, and there's some listed there. You want to make sure you have a flashlight and batteries and a battery-operated radio, a pocket knife that can come in handy for a number of things. Some people say emergency cash in small denominations. Make sure you have changes of clothes and a warm hat. Some people suggest a paper and pencil. Your list of emergency point of contact numbers, that plan should be with you. You should have something written down about any allergies that you might have to any drugs, so that if for some reason you're unconscious, somebody would know. And prescription medications and first aid supplies, that's really huge. And any special needs items that are specific to an individual. And just some things for infant and children. Remember to have a 2-week supply of canned formula. You're going to need diapers, bottles, powdered milk, medications. If your child has a pacifier, oh my, don't forget that. And their favorite blanket or toy if you have to leave in a hurry. So now we're going to move on to the go bag, where you would be a very concentrated form of a get ready kit. So if you must leave home, you should always be prepared to evacuate. Keep all of the items that you will most likely need during evacuation in an easy-to-carry container, such as a backpack or duffel bag, and keep the bag in an easy place to reach near the exit of your home that you use the most. And some of the things are taken right out of your ready kit, such as the first aid kit, a blanket, medicines, food and water, flashlight, copy of the emergency plan, a radio. So I'm going to just talk for a little while about resources. And there are really a lot of resources out there. If you go to the Vermont Emergency Management website, they have a lot of information there. They actually have a family emergency preparedness workbook, which is really handy. And it has some of the forms already in there that you can just fill out, and it gives you some great information how to prepare by month. And in the back, there's even a grid where you can make your home fire safety map, and that can be downloaded on the site. I would be happy also if you let me know to send you one. Also in that same site at the Vermont Emergency Management, it's called Just in Case, Be Ready for an Emergency, an Emergency Readiness Planning Guide for People Who May Need Extra Assistance. And this is really, really nice for anybody who has any disability or special needs. It has checklists, it has forms, it has a health information form. There's just a wide variety of different things included. And if you can't download it from the Vermont Emergency Management site, I would be happy to send that to you as well. There is the site you can go to for the Vermont Emergency Response Volunteers System, VERV, and that has a lot of very Vermont-specific information as well. And I want to go back about the Vermont Emergency Management. They also have on that site tips for preparing for hazards, and they have little sheets specifically around preparing your home and yourself, tips for evacuation, floods, power outages, fires, and so it's broken down into different things, which is really helpful. There's the Vermont Emergency Management Local Emergency Planning Committee contact list. We had talked about that earlier. And then the Disability Preparedness website provides practical information for people with and without disabilities, and in planners and first responders to help them to better prepare for serving persons with disabilities. There's FEMA. The Federal Emergency Management Agency's mission is to support U.S. citizens and first responders to ensure that as a nation we work together to build, sustain, and improve our capability to prepare for, protect against, and respond to, recover from, and mitigate all hazards. And also FEMA has a downloadable Preparing for Disaster for People with Disabilities and Other Special Needs booklet that you can download as well, and has a lot of checklists and information in that as well. So if you have any trouble downloading that, let me know and I can send you one. And before I turn from the slide, I just wanted to say that that picture up there, although you might expect that to be somewhere out west for disaster assistance, there's the FEMA number. This was actually on Route 7 in Charlotte after the flooding from Hurricane Irene. The Vermont Department of Health, check out their E-Ready Public Health Preparedness resources. They have some really good ones there. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention site has loads of information on health. And this particular link will take you to the Disability and Health Emergency Preparedness page. And there's the last link on that is the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, information on preparing, planning, and being informed about all emergencies and disasters. And one that's not on here, of course, is the American Red Cross. They have a great site, and it talks about emergency preparedness. I mean, that's kind of who they are and what they are. But they also have disaster preparedness booklet for people with disabilities, and it can be downloaded off their website. And it's really comprehensive and has lists and places that you just fill out. So if it's not something that you feel that you can, the emergency plan is something you can do on your own, this is really helpful. And if you have any trouble downloading that from the American Red Cross site, just let me know and I can send that to you. And another one that's pretty specific to people with developmental disabilities is it's called My Health Passport. And it's really written for a person with a developmental disability to have with them in their wallet at all times, because it's actually for a healthcare professional who will be reading this that would be able to help them with their treatment. It's very simple, it's very comprehensive, and it's something that you can go over with your individual or child with a developmental disability, and this would help them in case that you're not here. And this comes from the Florida Center for Inclusive Communities, and it can be downloaded there, and if it's something that you're interested in, I can certainly send you a copy of that as well. The other thing that was developed was the Green Mountain Guide for Emergency Planning, and it's a binder, and it's called My Personal Safety and Emergency Kit, and it again is for people and individuals and children with developmental disabilities to use in case of an emergency. And it was developed by the Green Mountain Emergency Preparedness Project and funded by the Family Support 360 grant. And that was in partnership with the Vermont Family Network, the Federation of Families, Green Mountain Self-Advocates, the Vermont Center for Independent Living, the Family Resource Consultants from the I-Team, and other Vermonters with disabilities and their families. They took a great deal of time of going around and having forums and asking people and individuals and families what they thought needed to be in this booklet and what it should look like. So you can download the contents from the uvm.edu CDCI site. We also have binders here. They might have some as well that could be sent to you. I am only one, but I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something, and I will not let what I cannot do interfere with what I can do, and that was by Edward Hale. And I want to thank you for joining this webinar that's just to get you thinking about emergency preparedness. And if you would like a copy, certificate of completion for this webinar, you can email Janice Sabat at vfn.org, and there's a dot in between the Janice and the Sabat, or you can call 1-800-800-4005. And thank you for participating in our webinar.